안녕하세요. 피어나의원 최호성 원장입니다. 저희 병원은 평소 환자분들의 안전과 효과적인 시술에 최선을 다하고 있습니다. 이에 철저한 방역 지침 준수와 출입 관리 체계를 구축하여 운영하고 있습니다. 저희 병원에서는 이번에 강력한 비말 흡입 살균기 케어 센스를 도입하여 시술을 위해 마스크를 벗어야 하는 상황까지도 감염 예방이 소홀해지지 않도록 방역 체계를 한 단계 더 업그레이드 하였습니다. 저희 피어나 의원을 찾아주시는 모든 분들의 안전과 효과적인 시술을 위해 항상 최선을 다하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Jung of Yu & Jung Skin Clinic in Seoul. With MFinders, I developed a new concept of lifting thread called N-Flip. Today, it is a great honor to be able to give the first lecture in front of you to commemorate the launching of N-Flip. I'm a dermatologist and run a clinic specialized in tightening and lifting and facial contouring. Okay, then let us start my lecture. At this time today, first I will introduce the basics of a thread lift, and then I will explain the critical role of the cog and its dynamics. Afterwards, I will introduce today's hero and flips in detail. And lastly, I will tell you about some useful tips for thread lift. First, let's talk about the concept of thread lifting. If you plan to start thread lifting, there is something for you to have to know. Thread lift is not a procedure to remove sagging skin. It is a treatment that moves upward back. As in this picture, if your skin is successfully lifted through thread lift, the lower face, such as the jawline, becomes sharp, but that's not all. Since the sagging skin is pulled up and redistributed, somewhere the volume will increase. In other words, you have to consider not only how to pulling up, but also where the skin will move and be redistributed when pulled up. In this respect, thread lift is different from surgical facelift. In facelift, after the incision and dissection, the whole skin is pulled up, and then the part of the skin that clump at the upper area is resected. However, in thread lifting, there is no process of cutting the cutaneous tissue, so it doesn't end in pulling up well. The lifted skin should not clump or create unwanted volume. Therefore, thread lift is a more advanced technique that requires more elaborate design and procedure. There are various types of lifting thread, various ingredients, the presence or absence of cog, and various thickness and length. Among them today, I'm going to talk about a lifting thread with cog. In order to understand thread lift very well, first, you need to get a complete understanding of the dynamics of cog. The most basic concept of thread lift is to fix mobile and soft tissue to immobile and hard tissue. And in this process, thread acts as a mediator. Dividing the face by upper and lower portion, usually lower portion of cheeks are sagging and mobile tissue. So we lift up this area to the relatively hard and immobile temporal areas and fix. Dividing the face by anterior and posterior portion, anterior area is relatively mobile and posterior is immobile. So we can pull the saggy jaw toward the ear and fix. Because it's for lifting, first thread have to lift up the skin effectively. Then with what to lift up? We can use cogs with upward direction. Look at the picture A. If there are cogs of upward direction, when the thread is pulled upward cog bite and lift up the skin. On the other hand, as in picture B, if there are only downward cog without upward cog, when the thread is pulled upward, downward cog cannot hold the tissue, so the skin cannot be lifted and only the thread falls out. Let's assume that we have succeeded in skin lifting with upward cog. Then we need to fix it so that the lifted skin does not come down again. How can we fix it? The first way is anchor. It is a method of hanging a long thread on a solid and immobile anchoring point and keeping the lifted state under the mutual check of both strands of thread. In the most classical way of anchoring, the thread is fixed in the deep temporal fascia. Easy lift is the representative one. Actually, I still like easy lift. The effect is strong and awesome. However, it is very surgically invasive. In order to anchor deeply, I have to use a temporal needle like this. After the procedure, the swelling also lasts quite a while. As you know, more simple and easy ways for anchoring have been introduced. I put this into the category of modified anchoring. The Seamless Soft is a prime example. Seamless Soft has needles at both ends of the long thread, making it less invasively anchored. Similar thread has been released. So, it can be possible to anchor the thread easily to anywhere and more shallow layer. It seems that there was no need to fix only on the deep temporal fascia. However, this approach has a fatal drawback. Do you know the cheese wire phenomenon? Because the anchoring point is not so hard, the thread keeps flowing down from the anchoring point, just like a cheese wire cuts cheese. In spite of immediate successful lifting, if the thread flows down like this, then the effect will be dramatically reduced. After lifting, another way to fix the lifted state is to use the cog with downward direction. Imagine that you lift the skin with thread with only upward cog without downward cog. The skin can be successfully lifted. But after that, if you release the thread, the skin will return back downward to its original position. This is because there is nothing to fix the lifted state. But if there are downward cog, the result will be different. If you put the thread in and put it up, it can lift up the skin. As mentioned earlier, it is the upward cog that plays a role in lifting. And after that, when you release the thread, if there are downward cog, the lifted skin does not flow down. Can you understand? Until now, I've talked about two ways to fix and maintain the lifted skin so that it doesn't flow down again. One is anchoring, and the other is using downward cog. But today's hero M-Flip uses both of these methods together. If the thread is only anchored to the skin that is not very hard, the cheese wire phenomenon can occur. However, in addition to anchoring, M-Flip uses downward cog and distribute the force of pulling down. As a result, the lifting effect is maintained better and longer. It's very attractive just to hear this far, right? Let's learn more about M-Flip. First, M-Flip uses the multiple bidirectional cog method, which is the pride of end-finders. I will give a more basic explanation. Early models of this single-strand floating type thread were bidirectional. The principle is lifting the sagging part with upward cog and fixing the lifted state with downward cog. That's a good way, but the downside is starting to appear. I do not want to talk about the case where the thread is broken inside. Another drawback is that the skin gathers at the point where the direction of cog changes, creating volume. Typically, this is that case. She came to me after thread lift in other clinic. The jawline might have been pulled up well, but the zygoma became too big. In this case, it would have been better to use short thread in several levels rather than a long thread. If using a long thread, I should have a different design so that the thread works primarily on the lower face. In other words, the individualized design is essential. This is not just in case of bidirectional, but in all cases. But if we use bidirectional cogs thread, we have to have a more individualized design. In the early days of thread lifting, I learned the standardized design. At first, draw a line from the eyebrow to the side. Then the point where the line meets hairline is the ideal insertion point of a thread. And from there, put the thread at 1 centimeter intervals. However, I think this is wrong because each person has a different face shape. For some people, this design may be appropriate, but for others may not. This may be the reason why the result is not good, even though your procedure is very well and perfect without mistake as you learned. Both of these methods, both of this thread has 10 centimeter bidirectional cog, but these two threads are completely different for me. The height at which skin gathers and create volume is different. The point would be here in A, but here in B. You cannot treat with the same design. Of course, bidirectional cog thread have some advantages. If you design well and complete the procedure, you can achieve really good result with bidirectional cog thread. If you can properly lifting the sagging skin and give volume to the depressed area, then the result will be best. Yeah, lift up the sagging skin and make the volume on the depressed area. Like this. She has prominent zygoma, subzygomal hollowness, and sagging jowl. For her, we can lift the jowl and move and make the volume to the subzygoma. Then the face line becomes smooth, like this. But if the insertion point is high, so the skin gathering point is not subzygoma, but zygoma that has already protruded, the worst result will come out like the photo I showed earlier. Although the procedure is equally perfect, small differences in design can make a big difference in result. The same goes for this one. Since I lifted the saggy cheek and moved it to the subzygoma, the facial line got better, right? Like this, in case of using bidirectional cog thread, subtle difference in design and misjudgment can make too much different result. There are too many variables in bidirectional cog thread. The other advantage of multiple bidirectional cog thread, I think, is that they reduce these variables. It can reliably produce relatively uniform and predictable result. Its principle is as follows. With multiple bidirectional cog thread, once the thread and skin come in contact, it is difficult to move up or down anymore. In other words, it has the power to keep the shape of the first moment of contact between the thread and the skin. So first, let the sagging skin lift naturally, and then multiple bidirectional cog thread is inserted to fix and maintain the lifted state. Then, it would be important to lift the sagging skin naturally first. That's why I recommend the patient to lie down during treatment. When lying down, sagging skin is naturally lifted up. For more powerful result, thread lifting can be done under the hyperextension of the neck as in this photo. Anyway, M-flip uses the multiple bidirectional cog method, providing more stable and uniform result. The second feature of an M-flip is that it can easily make anchoring through flip. Do you know Samsung's mobile phone Galaxy Z Flip? Like Z Flip, it is a thread that really flips. Until before, after insertion the thread, usually the outer portion is cut off. But with N-flip, I don't cut it, but flip and put it into the skin to make an anchor, like that. In order to increase holding force when inserted, the cogs are added to the outer portion, which is a simple but good feature of the end flip. In detail, let's look at the procedure of flipping. First, insert the thread with a cannula and remove the cannula. Without cutting, put the outer end back into the cannula like this, but just less than 5 millimeters, not so long. In this state, flip the thread and put it inside the skin. And remove the cannula. Easily create an anchor through flip. Simple, isn't it? Like this, flip and flip along the hairline to fix and fix. First I design, mark the jawline, and the most sagging area as well. And mark a little depressed area to be careful not to make more depression. In my design, I use 4 insertion points along the hairlines and insert at least 10 end flip threads per side. So from the upper holes vertically and from the lower hole horizontally. For pain control, rather than tumescent solution, I inject epilidocaine only to the insertion point. To reduce the pain, it is good to use some ice before injecting. Okay. This is real procedure. After puncture, the 4 points per side, I put the thread starting from the lower point to the marionette line along the jawline. Inserting thread is not different from conventional method. Look at this. But after removing the cannula, I do not cut the outer end, but flip and put it inside the skin again. Okay. I put another thread through the same hole. And remove the cannula and flip and reinsert. When flipping in, at the moment the thread becomes invisible, you need to push in a little more and come out. If the less push it in, the folded end can be touched and visible in the hole. Next, insert 2 more to the second hole. And when you get used to it, you do not have to totally remove the cannula out of the thread. With a slight bit of the end of the thread, you can push the cannula into the skin. But when reinserting, the thread length inside the cannula must not be more than 5 millimeters. Very simple procedure. And near or inside the hairline, you need to check if the hair does not go into the hole together. One more. If you think the hair is inside the hole, you can put it out with a forceps. And sometimes you can use some sterile ointment to remove the hair. Okay, the other side. To prevent hair from getting curled in, it is also good idea to attach a sterile tegaderm. It is a very simple procedure. From the lower portion, lower part, to the marionette line along the jawline. I think that the ideal depth is that deep subcutaneous fat or under or lower this mass. But this thread is the not so thick thread, so maybe the lesser deep depth is, I think that will be good, I think. So not too deep. And I recommend to use the thread at least 10 or sometimes 15 per side, because the thread length and thickness is not so long and thick. Okay, if you have experience of doing thread lifting before, you can do this technique using M flip right away. Very simple procedure. Okay, if the end of the thread came out a little, don't panic. Just pull it slightly and cut it like that, just like you did with conventional thread lifting. Likewise, M-flip uses both anchoring method and downward cork together, which are the representative ways to fix the lifted skin so it doesn't go down again. And even the anchoring process is very simple compared with other anchoring thread. Lastly, since this is my first lecture through M-Finders, here are some useful tips for overall thread lifting. When you do the thread lifting, how do you make sure you are inserting the thread to the right depth? There are 3 checkpoints. First, the tip of the needle or cannula must be touched. If you can't touch it, the thread is too deep now. Second, when the cannula goes forward, there should be a little resistance. Third, when you shake the cannula inside the skin, it should not make a dimple. Making a dimple means that it is too shallow. Next, I will tell you about the use of the minor hand. Minor hand means the left hand. When thread lifting, the hand holding the thread may be your right hand, but actually the left hand may play a more important role. What if you pinch the skin with your left finger and insert the thread? From the skin's point of view, the thread acts as a resistance. Even if the pinching hand is released, the skin does not return to its original state, forming volume. Conversely, what if you stretch the skin with your left finger and insert the thread? It can produce a tightening effect. If you apply this a little more, you can also do the leveling. If you want to make the protruding skin to be flattened, stretch the protruding part with your left finger and run the thread shallower at this part. Then the protruding skin will be flattened. On the other hand, if you want to raise up the depressed area, pinch and run the thread deeper at this part. Then the depressed skin will be raised. How can I stretch this kind of facial line? I will put the thread in front of the ear toward the marionette line. When passing over the masseter muscle, first pinching and run deeply. And in the protruding buccal fat, first stretching and run shallowly. Then sagging facial line becomes lifted and smoother. Just like layering injection with fillers, you can do layering in thread lifting as well. First, put the thread deeply down to the lower area and lift up. And then put the thread from the upper area and shallower and pull up the skin once more. That's a good way, I recommend. When doing thread lift, you may want to avoid making a dimple, but you can't always avoid it. But actually, dimple is not always bad. Having a dimple means that the thread is surely fixed as well. So when it comes to lifting effect, dimple is by no means a bad thing. However, it will be difficult if it occurs in visible areas. But on the other hand, I think dimples in the invisible area inside the hairline is never bad. Anyway, there are times when a dimple comes up and needs to be fixed. How do you solve it? You can always press the skin around the dimple and spread it out, but there are some times when you do not succeed. In that case, I use cannula or needle to do subcision. When doing subcision, depth is important. Of course, you have to go between the thread and dermis. If you only know these principles, you don't have to be so scared about dimple. Immediately after the procedure, there is a puncture hole. So through that hole, you can do subcision with a cannula or needle. Or if this is uncomfortable, you can puncture a new about 1 centimeter next to the dimple and do subcision with a cannula or needle. Okay, I will summarize. M-flip provide more stable fixation through both anchoring and multiple bidirectional cog. Even though it contains a new concept, M-flip lifting is easy and very simple. So I believe that anyone who has experiences doing thread lifting can easily follow and do it successfully. Thank you so much. Q&A 하시면 네. Yeah, the question is that do you think the best treatment of which one hole needs 2 threads? I think that the best way is 1 hole and 1 thread. So for one face, one side, I think that more than 5 or 10 hole is good because it can divide the force dividing the force and enhance the combine the power and so enhance the maintaining fixing power. But I cannot make the hole more than 5 in per side because it makes some pain or other things. So I usually use 4 or 5 holes per side. So per 1 hole, I usually insert 2 or 3 threads, but not more than 4 or 5 threads. Okay. The second question, what are the challenges performing the procedure, patient selection, procedure itself? Yeah, always in thread lift, patient selection is very important, I think. So I usually recommend the thread lifting to the skinny patient. If the patient have a lot of volume around the lower face, at first I recommend another treatment, reducing fat destroying, solution injection, and so on. So at first I recommend this thread lifting for the patient with a slim face, and the procedure is very easy. The most challengeable thing is that to treat the hair, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have to see the hair inside the hole or not. So if the hair is inside the hole, you have to remove with the forceps. Procedure is very simple. Can I flip twice? how to flip twice, I think. Just if the thread is long and another design, then you can make some M shape or W shape, but with my thread, just one time of flip is enough. Two direction goes in the same layer or into the different layer. Yeah, usually I recommend the first inserting time I go to the more shallower and flip and reinserting the end of the thread at the time I go more deeper. So usually I use the two layer. The first one is the shallower and the second one is a deeper. Or sometimes different vector. So sometimes go to vertical or sometimes go to 45 or 60 degrees to make an anchor. But it depends on you. Yeah, you can do other things. But I want to know something is that the second thread, it means that flipping thread is shorter than the original first thread. So if the second thread is shallower exists, then sometimes the end of the thread can be touches on the skin. So when you flip and reinsert, then deeply go deeper than the first thread. Very good. What is the reason for not inserting whole cannula when inserting the remaining thread? Yeah, at first I will insert using the whole cannula, and so it means that the thread inside the cannula is just maybe 2 centimeters or more. But in that case, I want you to try. In that case, the anchoring does not made, I think. Yeah, I do some experience on the pig skin, I do some excision and I check it. But if you insert the whole cannula over the thread, then the anchoring does not made. Yeah, check it. My method is right. So inside the cannula, just less than 5 millimeter is enough, and that is correct. What about using M flip in overall technique? So fixation is hard fixation in temporal fascia. I expect that M-finders someday M-finders made a new, another upgraded M flip using the more thicker one. But in my thread, now M flip is very not so thick. So with this M flip, we cannot made a fixation on the deep temporal fascia. So for anchor into the deep temporal fascia, we have to use the more thicker one. But someday, maybe not so long, M-finders will make the new version. Okay, I believe. I can use long thread in the same way. Spiral thread is. I can use long thread in the same way. Spiral thread is 15 centimeters.
저희 제품이 150ml짜리 제품이 있는데 그거를 이제 그런 용도로 쓸 수 있거든요.
Okay. I want you to know that in M flip, the outer portion, usually the outer portion is cut off, but in M flip, we add another cog to the outer end. So we inserted outer end have a fixing power, but maybe I think that now your thread, with your thread, we can make a flip, and it make a fixation power more stronger, I believe. But M flip have another added cog in the outer end, so you can do, and sometimes someday M finders added a cog to your 15 centimeter spiral thread. I think you can flip, you can use long thread in the same way. You can do. Yeah. Is this recommended for forehead lifting? Maybe you can do, I think, but for forehead lifting, you have to be careful. You have to be careful about the hair curled in to the hole, and maybe for forehead lifting, I think you have to use a lot of thread or more thicker one someday. Someday, I'm finding made other flipping method thread for the forehead, I think. You can try. The depth of insertion is at the superficial fat above SMAS, correct? Do you insert under the deep fan layer below the SMAS? Usually with this M flip, I target the superficial fat above SMAS, or sometimes above or below the upper SMAS. It do not mean that deep facial layer. SMAS, there is a fascia, so near the fascia, not under the muscle or SMAS, so not deep fan layer. Can you understand? There is the skin and cutaneous fat and SMAS and muscle and deep fan layer, but between the borderline of the superficial fat and SMAS, or sometimes below the SMAS, but not deep fat layer. Did you try another different flap direction? For example, A-shape direction, not V-shape. Okay. Yeah, I think that for A-shape direction, the outer end, so it means that we inserted portion of the thread have to be more longer than now. So this until now, the first inserting portion is about 6 centimeter, and the outer portion is maybe 4 centimeter, I think. But if you for the A-shape direction, the outer portion have to be more longer. So yeah, I will tell to the M finders about the more longer thread for the A-shape direction. Good idea, I think. Did you already use M flip with M flip thread together? M fix thread together? Yeah. That is my favorite combination. Yeah, M flip to deep inside and very hard. At first M flip. Yeah, I'm sorry. At first with M fix, very hard fixation with M fix inside, deep inside, and using the M flip, more superficial, shallower. So I told you about the layering method of thread. So with M fix, deeper, and with M flip, shallower. Very nice combination. Yeah. How about brow lifting using this thread? Yeah. Another same question about this. I think it will be good, but for this, maybe some more thicker M flip, new version of M flip will be suitable for the forehead brow lifting. I will try with this. I will try, and someday I will tell you about it. 없어요? Okay. Yeah, it's a very great honor for me to give the lecture and have a conversation with you with my first thread with M-Finders called M-Fleet. Thank you so much, and I hope that someday we see face to face and talk a lot of things, and I see your procedure and you see me, my procedure. May someday I hope we can do that. Okay? Okay, bye-bye. Thank you so much.